What up? What up? It's been a long time since I've done a video on here, Kayfabe All Day, where I talk pro wrestling, old school, the Kayfabe era, which I consider that era to be since the formation of the NWA in 1948 all the way through probably 1991. Um, and or we could just say 92, whatever. But I've been watching a lot of old school pro wrestling on Peacock lately, and just recently watched a few events from the late 80s. um, Great American Bash 88, Starcade 88, Chi-Town Rumble 89, Wrestle War 89, and Great American Bash 89. And I'm watching it with my son, who obviously didn't grow up. I was born in 74. He was born in 98. So he didn't grow up watching this stuff. So he's watching it from a modern perspective, and he loves the old school stuff. He doesn't love current wrestling. So, but one of the things I want to talk about, the differences between the Dusty Crockett era versus early Turner NWA era, which would be like 89, 90, 91. One thing I noticed automatically was the promos during Dusty's booking era were far better than the early Turner era. When I was watching the Bash 89 and the promos for the War Games, and it just seemed like guys were mailing in their promos, except for Hawk. And so that's one of the things I noticed is the promos were far better during the Dusty Crockett era. Not only that, I think the one thing about Dusty, which that he was great at, was he made you interested in every single issue, every single angle meant something, right? Whether it was Paul Jones versus Jimmy Valiant, all the way up through the card. Whereas I believe in the early Turner era, as great as the main events are, we talk about the trilogy with Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair, which was great. A lot of the undercard and mid-card was just like throwaway. There wasn't a lot of attention given. There was some good stuff like Great Muta versus Sting and things like that, but a lot of stuff was just throwaway stuff. And again, they started. One of the things too is in the Crockett era, Dusty Crockett era, which was 85 through the end of 88, it had a grittiness to it, right? It had a grittiness. I really felt like early Turner NWA, they didn't have an identity. They were trying to like incorporate some WWF type of things and still hold on to old school. So it kind of had this weird vibe to it, it had like a corporate vibe, right? And I really thought the special thing about Dusty is that you knew you were watching pro wrestling. There was a grittiness to it. And so that's kind of those are the things I notice. Like I felt like the promos and the Dusty era too, they were like raw. The backdrop of it would be like the NWA background with the Mid-Atlantic or NWA letters, and then early Turner, it seemed like they were trying to be like WWF and have this like green screen background. And I never liked those type of promos. I thought they were just generic. I mean, those setups. So yeah, I thought the Dusty had far better attention to detail. A lot of people rag on Dusty, and he has, obviously the criticisms of Dusty are valid. The Dusty finish, spending way too much money. The thing about Dusty was he liked things very big and dramatic. So, you go back to the Great American Bash of 1986. As great as that Great American Bash was from a booking standpoint, the matches were awesome, the feuds, all that stuff. He booked a lot of stadium shows that he didn't need to, like Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia, Fulton County in Atlanta, the Liberty Bowl in Memphis. And it wasn't worth it because they weren't drawing enough to justify booking these big stadiums. Then putting on these country music concerts, that had to cost money. So, and then of course, the buying out the UWF when they didn't need to, and the having their now headquarters in Dallas, having to buy a plane. It just spending way too much money. So fiscally, Dusty was irresponsible. He had a high tolerance for Jim Crockett's pain in terms of spending money. But when it comes to booking, right, every booker we know has his shelf life. Dusty, though, like even in '88, which is known as a down year for Crockett, on screen, I thought it was a very entertaining year. When I watched Bash '88, I mean the Luger Flair matches were awesome. Barry Windham as a heel U.S. champion was awesome. Sting was like he came of age in 1988. Sting was awesome. The Fantastics Midnight Express feud, just a lot of good stuff. It's unfortunate that in later 1988, I thought it was unfortunate that the Horsemen left because it would have been nice to see the Horsemen, talking about Anderson and Blanchard, stay and wrestle the Midnight Express at Starrcade. As cool as I thought the original Midnight Express versus Midnight Express angle was, I thought it would have been far better having Anderson and Blanchard finish their feud with the Midnights. And then, of course, I actually like the Road Warriors turn. And I understand why they had to be baby faces, but I never liked the Road Warriors baby faces. I thought they lost their edge. I could never buy the Road Warriors as victims. So when they turned to heel on Dusty and Sting, I thought it was awesome at the time. And I thought it was a good match at Starrcade, Sting Dusty against the Road Warriors. So in Starrcade '88, and a lot of people talk about this, that's the last that's the last show that really had a Crockett feel to it. Even though Crockett by that point had already sold, World Championship Wrestling to Turner, I think October or November of '88. That was the last show that had a Crockett feel, because the next pay-per-view in February, you could tell there's definitely a different feel to it, different production. And again, 1989 is awesome because of Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, and then Ric Flair, Terry Funk, and Great Muta and Sting. And so 1989 is really good, but I really feel like they didn't have the attention to detail that Dusty had, because you had a lot of throwaway stuff in 1989, and I felt like the promos weren't as good in 1989. I felt like a lot of guys mailed in their promos. Obviously, Lex Luger was great in 1989, and that's another thing that I feel that they dropped the boat on with Luger in 1988. Now, I love the fact they didn't put the title on Luger because it gave us Ricky Steamboat. But I really feel, objectively, that they had to put the title on Luger, because when he didn't beat Flair at Starrcade '88, it's kind of like it reminded me of Hogan and Bockwinkel when Hogan didn't win at the Super Sunday. It, like, after a while, fans stop believing in somebody when when over and over again they try for the title, they come close and they don't get it. Of course, Luger's heel turn and his 1989 was a great year for Luger, so he may not have had that. But honestly, I felt Luger should have won the title Bash '88. Like, if I had to rebook it, I would have never gave the title to Ronnie Garvin. Flair keeps title, and Flair then loses to Luger at Bash '88 and then wins it back at Starrcade '88. And he could still lose it to Steamboat, maybe a little later, not in February, but maybe like in the later spring he loses it, and you kind of just you push things back a little bit, right? You push things back. But the way the crowd popped at Bash '88 when Luger won the title, I mean, man, that was a huge, huge pop. And I think sometimes, like, Dusty just overthought the room. It's like, you just got to give the fans what they want sometimes. And that was the one knock on the NWA, is they didn't give the fans what they want a lot of times. And that's one of the things that Vince was great at, giving the fans what they wanted. So, yeah, man, let's face it, for all the criticism of Dusty, that's a lot of people's best memories of pro wrestling. from that time is the Dusty Crockett era of the NWA, 85 through late 88. When I watched Chi-Town Rumble, I already knew things are changing. I knew that things were changing, and not for the better. I felt like they were already getting away from the gritty feel. Although, like I said, the Flair Steamboat matches are priceless. But I felt like they were getting away from that great feel of gritty Crockett era wrestling. And now, it would have been interesting to see Dusty continue as Booker with under the Turner regime, how that would have worked out. But it was probably good because I don't know if Ricky Steamboat gets his shot at the world title with Dusty booking. So, anyways, those are my thoughts on the Dusty Crockett era NWA versus World Championship wrestling, the early Turner era. I felt they just lost something when they went, getting away from that gritty traditional NWA production and feel. Anyways, you guys have a good one. Let me know what you think.